So I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and I've owned a company and ran post-payment audits. And why is that relevant today? Well, what the Doge folk are finding shows how inexperienced they are. Let me explain. So post-payment audits there's a big companies do this all the time, and it's like, so we did it. I worked with accountants that worked on like a big Office Depot kind of store in Ohio, and at the end of the year, they would do their own internal audits, and they'd be like, "Our books are good. We're about to submit them as our final year's books. We will give you 2 weeks and give you all the books. And in those 2 weeks, any money you find that goes in our favor, we'll give you half. Now, if it goes in other people's favor, shut up. We don't want to hear about it. We only want to know the mistakes made in our favor." And so we would get this data, and you had 2 weeks. So the accountants were super hardcore. They slept in their offices. We would go sit next to them and help them. And because what we did is back in the day in the 90s, we called it fuzzy logic. It was just tokenizing data so that you weren't looking at the details of the data, but kind of a grosser level of it. I don't need to get into that. But the first time we got the data, we got the previous year's data, because we, as the engineers, the programmers, now joining the project, and getting hired to do this, wanted to look and see how do you approach this? How do you look at it? Because it's a shitload of data and we don't know anything about. Here's the thing. When you're not an accountant, what you find, they're like, yeah, that's a payment. Yeah, that's a payment. That's normal. That's not weird. That's normal. That's normal. That's normal. And that's what the Doge people are finding. They're not finding fraud. They haven't found a single case of fraud. What they've found is, oh yeah, Congress approved that payment. That's a payment made. They haven't found any weird things. They just don't understand, money that goes here and money that goes there. If the money here gets spent, that doesn't mean that money there doesn't get spent. It's all approved. It's all a budget, right? And our stupidity the first time, this is why it burned in my head, because we're like, hey, look at all this we found last year. And they're like, yeah, none of that is. And I will bet anybody, $100, that Doge does not prosecute one single person for fraud. Because if they're finding fraud, if they're finding so much fraud, they should be prosecuting people, right? So $100, anybody. I will put it in escrow to anybody. So I say $100 only because I'll bet 1,000 of you, because that'll be easy money for me. This is not going to happen. They're not going to find any fraud. What they're going to find is payments. Now, where we would find mistakes, and they were all mistakes, they're not fraud, right? It was these office companies. I remember Packard Bell. Packard Bell would be like, hey, once you sell over 1,000 units, we'll discount you 5% on every unit sold after that. And they would just start the discount on the end of the month instead of when the exact sale turned over, and then everything after that should be. And you find enough of those, and it's real money. I mean, they would find, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for that 2 weeks of work, which is a pretty good deal for them. And that's why they got so excited about it. You do not want to hang out with accountants. Think you're not well-kept accountants on day 1. Day 10, when they haven't showered and they're eating at their desk the whole time, and they're sleeping on a cot next to their desk, yeah, that's a smell. So I remember that smell, and I remember that thought of we've discovered all of this, only to realize that, well, yes, you actually do need programmers and engineers when looking at the data, because we help them find it, but we help them find it under the direction of accountants, people who know what the fuck they're talking about and doing. And that's just simply not happening under Doge. So again, $100. Let me know in the comments. Let's take the bets, because this is going to be easy money. No one's going to be prosecuted because there's no fraud happening.